We made it up, and now we're totally at the effect of our own creation. And we invented money. Money does not grow on trees. Pennies do not fall from heaven. We made it up 4,500 years ago as a society-wide phenomenon, and now it's hijacked us.
Lynne, twist, you have devoted your life to humanitarian, environmental and social justice causes, from working with Mother Teresa in Calcutta to advocating for rainforests.
People are not poor. What's poor is their circumstances, not them. In fact, people living in those kinds of circumstances are some of the strongest, most resilient, most creative people on this planet because they need to be. Maybe they don't know how to read or write because they haven't had that opportunity. But their strength, their courage, their capacity to relate to the natural world and to each other is the kind of thing we go to workshops for. But that's their life experience.
I'm sure you're proud of yourself for what you have accomplished for the Hunger Project, and which take us to your second chapter, the woman.
So the front and the back side of the hand of hunger, I really learned was the front side is the malnutrition, starvation, seasonal hunger, is physical, but the back side of the hand of hunger is the hunger for meaning in the affluent world, the hunger to make a difference with our lives, the hunger to matter, the hunger to find this place where we can find our life purpose. And so the fundraising for the Hunger Project became, in the affluent world, about helping people find their purpose and connect with something meaningful.
Hello and welcome to Kaplankaya on the southwestern Aegean coast of Turkey. We are recording the podcast, the Harvest series, where we interview amazing speakers, practitioners and artists joining the Harvest Summit. I hope you will enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to the Harvest Series podcast. We are in Kaplankaya and my guest today is Lynne Twist. Hello, Lynne.
Hello, wonderful to be here.
Thank you. And this is the last day of the summit. You have devoted your life to humanitarian, environmental and social justice causes, from working with Mother Teresa in Calcutta to advocating for the Amazon rainforest. Your insight into financial ethics and transformative change highlights humanity's interconnectedness and potential for positive impact. I'm very happy to have you on this podcast and being the last of the speakers interviewed here for Harvest.
I'm delighted to be here as well.
Wonderful. How were your days here in Kaplankaya for the summit?
Oh my goodness, it was just absolutely spectacular, and that is an understatement.
And you gave I don't even know if I can call it a speech. You just shared two beautiful stories to people, moving people to tears, and shared a meditation. And we're going to maybe if we have time to release your meditation, because I think it moved me a lot, seeing your ancestors and your descendants. That was a beautiful one. Everybody was also very touched. So maybe we're going to share it with the Harvest podcast listeners. That would be amazing. First, because you have a very rich life, full of stories and full of chapters, maybe so people can understand your life a bit better, would you mind to separate your life into chapters?
Oh.
That's a challenge, yes, I know.
Yes, well, it actually does kind of fall into chapters. Obviously I was born and raised and grew up. But my early life as a young woman, I was very, very fortunate to get involved in something in the United States that was a kind of controversial movement called EST, Earhart Seminars Training. And I took a training of EST, which was it was sort of the beginning of the human potential movement in the United States. And it was really about freeing yourself from your conditioning or things that locked you into patterns that you no longer wanted to have. And it just was like hitting me over the head like a 2x4. It woke me up out of the path that I was on, which was inauthentic for me. My husband started to make quite a bit of money, and we were getting involved in purchasing art and cars, and what we were going to do was to be cooler than the next couple. And then I took this training, and I realized this is just not the path for me. I'm faking it. That's not really who I am. And right after that, something called the Hunger Project began to be brewing in that same community. And I was lucky enough to meet Buckminster Fuller, who was a futurist, a humanitarian. He was an engineer and architect by training, but he lived a life that was designed to make a difference. And he coined the phrase, "A little individual can make a difference that impacts all humanity." And in that context of working with Buckminster Fuller, or not working with him, but being influenced by him and considering him one of my greatest teachers, he also initiated a phrase to create a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out. And that phrase, create a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, set me on a path that ultimately became my first chapter, I'll say, as an adult woman, which was the Hunger Project. Wow. And the Hunger Project was co-founded by Werner Erhard, who founded EST, John Denver, the great singer, an American singer, and a third man named Bob Fuller, but also influenced by Buckminster Fuller. And the Hunger Project was really an initiative designed to create a commitment, worldwide commitment, to end world hunger. Because Buckminster Fuller said it's really an integrity issue. There's plenty of food. There always has been, or there has been for a long, long time. But what's missing is the commitment to everyone, everywhere having a healthy and productive life. So the Hunger Project was born in 1977, and I was right there, and I became completely and totally devoted to ending world hunger. That's how I ended up in India, learning at the feet of Mother Teresa. That's how I worked all over sub-Saharan Africa, Ethiopia, Guinea-Bissau, Burkina Faso, Ghana, Senegal, Zimbabwe, really learning on the ground what it means to realize that the human spirit cannot be quenched, and everyone everywhere can have a healthy and productive life. And people are not poor. What's poor is their circumstances, not them. In fact, people living in those kinds of circumstances are some of the strongest, most resilient, most creative people on this planet because they need to be. Maybe they don't know how to read or write because they haven't had that opportunity. But their strength, their courage, their capacity to relate to the natural world and to each other is the kind of thing we go to workshops for. Yeah. But that's their life experience. Mm-hmm. So I spent 25 years working on ending world hunger in all of those countries while I was raising my children, which was a little bit of a challenge.
Wow.
But they came with me everywhere.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And
so it shaped them also.
Shaped them also. And my husband was doing business, but he got very involved also in the Hunger Project. And that work really forged a kind of a place in my soul that I understand now to be a deep well of understanding what it means to be human, no matter what the circumstances. What it means to be a human being is now very, very clear for me that everyone everywhere wants to make a difference with their life. Everyone everywhere has the capacity, the infinite capacity to make a difference with their life, to serve, to thrive, to be of use, to be someone who matters, no matter what the circumstances they're born into. And that commitment, that realization, that revelation, that transmission, you might call it, has served me now in the next chapter of my life, which I'll get to.
Before going to the second chapter, you've seen so many things, beautiful things, hard things, and how can you still be touched so much?
Well, even in the most devastating and tragic circumstances in sub-Saharan Africa, during the 1984-1985 famine, for example, I told this story at the harvest. When you really spend time seeing who people are, no matter what their circumstances, no matter what they've been through, you see their beauty, their self-sufficiency, their commitment to life, and that's really what I learned during those years. And you know, I've held dying babies in my arms as they died in Bangladesh, and I know the value of life.
Wow. Because you've seen death and horrible situations, like mother losing their children. You were telling the story.
Yes.
During famines and mother being completely devastated and sharing the stories with you.
Yeah, and not being able to feed your own child. I mean, it's almost unimaginable for me as a mother that your child would die and you would survive. They would die of starvation and you would still be alive. And I've sat with women who've been through that. So I know the depth that people go to in their soul when something like that happens to them. But also the integrity and power of being committed to not only to survive, but to find a way to thrive no matter what. And no matter what the circumstances, we can all do that. And so somehow I've been lucky enough, and you know, I worked with Mother Teresa, so at the Home of Deaf and Dying, I worked in the leprosy center with her. Not worked, just accompanied her.
What did you learn from her, from Mother Teresa?
Well, she said many, many wonderful things. She didn't speak much. It was all about being in the presence of a living saint. But there was one thing that I think is really important that I learned from her, and there's a quote that I like to share. She said, "The unadulterated love of one person can nullify the hatred of millions." The unadulterated love of one person can nullify the hatred of millions. And that quote is attributed to both Gandhi and Mother Teresa. I don't know who said it first. But that is the most amazing way to live. No one can prove that that's true. But you kind of know when you hear that it is true. At least it's a way to live. And she lived that way.
You too.
I hope so. I didn't realize I was going to cry all the way through this interview.
That's beautiful. I'm very moved. I've been crying yesterday, so now it's your turn. Wow. Did you lack of love when you were a child? Or
no, I had a wonderful childhood. My parents were amazing people. My mother was what I now call myself a pro-activist rather than an activist for, not against. And I know what's in between my vision for the world and me and where we are now. There's lots of obstacles, but I'm not against them. I know that to dismantle them, to hospice the death of the old structures and systems that no longer serve us is the job, to hospice their natural death because they're unsustainable and they're dying, while we midwife the birth of the new structures and systems that can serve us, that we understand now. And my mother was like that. She was... you might call her, in her day, a civic leader. She was very, very engaged in world adoption. WAIF, it was called, World Adoption Infant Foundation. And my father was a musician, a fabulous band leader in the big band days, when in the end of World War II, there was a surge of joy in the United States and around the world, of course, but certainly in the United States, where we didn't have the devastation of Europe. And the big band days, the big bands were very, very popular, and there wasn't any television. So people went out and they danced. And my dad had a dance band, and it was so much fun. I was a little girl, very little. But so there was a lot of joy, and then my mother worked on what was hard and difficult. And they were very loving parents. And then my father died unexpectedly from a heart attack when he was 50 years old in his sleep. And my mother was 46. I was almost 14. My older sisters and brother and I, we didn't understand death. We were too young. My mother, because she was so shocked by my father's death, he died in his sleep of a heart attack in the middle of the night. In the morning, she just couldn't wake him. So it was very, very shocking for her. So she kind of farmed out her kids and had to deal with, he was a famous man, so had to deal with all the press. And I remember thinking, when my father died, like many children do when an unexpected death takes place, that it had to be my fault.
Oh, okay.
It's illogical,
Yeah.
but a child thinks that when suddenly their parent is gone. And I remember thinking that I would find a way to honor his life. That's probably, it wasn't that conscious, as I'm saying, but I was a popular kid, and we were Catholic at the time. I was Catholic at the time. And I developed a very deep inner religious life, I thought then, but now I would call it a spiritual life, even though I was a kind of a popular kid on the outside. On the inside, I was grieving my father, so I spent a lot of time in prayer. And I think that's when I developed an inner strength and an inner life, really out of this thing that in Catholicism we call guilt. But it was a way of deepening my soul. I now am grateful for those years when I was in high school and I had to cope with my father's death. And now I realize that, it wasn't my fault. But at the same time, that event of losing my father, who was, for me, he hung the moon. He was it. I just adored my father. I think that in that tragedy, I found a way to commit my life to something larger than my own life starring me. And I wanted to do something that would make him proud wherever he went. So I think that had a huge influence on the direction I took later in life.
Are you still thinking of making him proud today?
I probably am. Actually, I think about that right now in this interview. So, yeah, thank you for asking that question.
Beautiful. So, I'm sure you're proud of yourself for what you have accomplished for the Hunger Project, and which take us to your second chapter, The Woman.
Well, there's sort of a chapter in the middle there. The Hunger Project, by the time it developed, I was responsible for the fundraising in 53 countries. So I was very deeply engaged in training fundraisers all over the world to fundraise with integrity rather than manipulation of any kind. And we developed a fundraising methodology that became famous because it was transformational for the people who gave money. They felt they were not ending only physical hunger, but ending their own hunger for meaning in their life. So the front and the back side of the hand of hunger, I really learned, was the front side is the malnutrition, starvation, seasonal hunger, is physical, but the back side of the hand of hunger is the hunger for meaning in the affluent world, the hunger to make a difference with our lives, the hunger to matter, the hunger to find this place where we can find our life purpose. And so the fundraising for the Hunger Project became, in the affluent world, about helping people find their purpose and connect with something meaningful. And so it was transformational, the work we did with fundraising all over the world. And I even taught people in Mozambique after the war how to raise money from each other rather than ask for a big grant from USAID, but to realize that in Mozambique there was the strength and the power to heal that country of war from Mozambique itself. Now, obviously, the amount of money you can raise in Mozambique from each other is not what you could get from the outside, but it strengthened that population so that they knew that they were reliant and self-sufficient. So that kind of fundraising we taught all over the world. And it became we became famous for that, and I became famous for that. So then I got involved in something called the State of the World Forum. This is a little bit an interim chapter, which was created by President Gorbachev after Perestroika and Glasnost. And he organized 5 years of global leaders coming together, 1,000 global leaders, every September for 5 days to look at the defining metaphors and the underlying principles of the 20th century that wanted to be taken into the 21st century. So it was from 1995 to the year 2000. People like Jane Goodall, Sylvia Earle, the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, you know, the kind of the leaders, Carl Sagan, scientists, the leaders of the world came together, convened by President Gorbachev. Margaret Thatcher was there, George Shultz, former President Bush. And I was very lucky to be part of that whole initiative. And that went for 5 years. And during that period, that's when the second chapter began for me. And actually, it was 1994. I was in Guatemala. I was doing a favor for one of our donors, one of our big, big donors, to help him with the fundraising for his small project in Guatemala. And I was invited, along with my friend John Perkins, to be in a shamanic ceremony at midnight on a mountaintop in Totonicapan, which is part of a beautiful place in Guatemala, a rural area. And I'd never been in a shamanic ceremony. I didn't even know what it was. There was no plant medicine. But at midnight, this shaman convened 12 of us, my friend John and myself, and we brought 10 other people. And we laid down by around a fire that the shaman had prepared, like a wagon wheel with our feet towards the fire. And the shaman started drumming like this, and whistling, and chanting. And it was unbelievably hypnotic and amazing. And I thought, this is incredible. And there was a beautiful night sky with incredible stars, no moon. And I was in a state of bliss, and I shut my eyes as the shaman asked us to do. And he told us to journey, and I didn't really know what that meant, but I, just thought I'd just rest there in this beautiful place with this beautiful sound of his voice and the crackling fire. And then at a certain point, my right arm started to quiver, and I felt that I couldn't hold it close to my body for another minute, and I had to extend it. And then suddenly my left arm started to quiver, and I had to extend that one. And then this funny, hard thing started to grow on my face, and then I just had to fly. I couldn't lay there for one more second. And I started to lift myself up into this beautiful night sky, and in slow motion started flying into the stars. And then I looked down, and I could see the campfire beneath me, and I could see myself lying there down there. And the shaman's voice and the drumming was still very present. It wasn't far away. It was right where I was, but I was up in the stars. And then I began to look down and realized it was dawning. And I saw beneath me, as I was flying in slow motion, this vast, 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 unending forest of green. And it went forever and ever and ever. And it was so beautiful that it moved me. And I was flying over this canopy, and I could see the little critters all the way through the trees down on the floor. I had incredible vision. And then when I looked ahead, I could see way far away. And I was flying in slow motion to this amazing sound of the shaman's voice. And then these disembodied faces of men with orange geometric face paint on their faces and yellow, red, and black feather crowns on their heads started floating up from the forest floor through the canopy and called to me, the bird, in a strange tongue that I didn't understand. And then they would disappear back into the forest, and I'd keep flying. And then they would show up again and call to the bird, me. And it was just this amazing, mesmerizing encounter, blissful, hypnotic encounter with these faces. And then back into the forest, and then they'd show up again. And I was in a state of ecstasy, flying and encountering these beautiful indigenous faces with the face paint and the crowns. And then at a certain point, the shaman bang, 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 his drum.
Wake up.
And he called us back, and I remember sitting up and realizing I was just me. There were no wings. I had no beak. I was just me. And the circle of people were all kind of discombobulated. Everybody looked kind of like me, strange. And the fire had gone down to embers. And the shaman then asked each of us to share what our vision was. And every single person around this circle had become an animal, a butterfly, a snake, a wolf, a jaguar. When it came to me, I shared my story. And the shaman gave me a look like he did everyone else, and went around to my friend John Perkins. And he had had a very, very similar vision. So the shaman completed the ritual. He sat us down and told John and I that we were being contacted. It wasn't a normal vision. We were being dreamed. We were being contacted. And we needed to go to the people who were contacting us. And I didn't really understand what he was saying, but John Perkins, who had worked in the Ecuadorian Amazon for years, said, "Lynne, I know who they are. I know where they are. They're the Achuar people. They're in Ecuador. They're ready for contact. They've seen in their dreams and visions that contact is inevitable, so they are initiating it. And they're calling us, and we need to go to the Ecuadorian Amazon." And I said, "I've never been to South America. I don't speak Spanish. I'm working on ending world hunger. I can't go to the Amazon. That's your work. You go." So then I went to Africa. I went to Ghana for my next thing, which was a board meeting in Accra at the Novotel. And I was staying there, and I was meeting with our Ghanaian brothers and sisters who were having their board meeting, and I was sitting in from the global headquarters. And we're having a meeting around an oval table, 5 men and 3 women, Ghanaian, very beautiful people with dark, almost blue-black skin. And at a certain point in the meeting, the conversation, the men, and only the men, started having orange geometric face paint appear on their beautiful black faces. And no one said anything. And I thought, no one sees this but me. And everybody's talking as if this is not happening. So I go to the ladies' room and splash water in my face and try to, get out of whatever this weird thing was happening to me. And I thought I must be hallucinating from the experience in Guatemala. I go back, and in 10 minutes it happens again. And I burst into tears. And everyone wanted to know what was wrong with me. And obviously they couldn't see this. So I thought, my God, what's happened to me? So I told them I had to go back to the United States. I was, overwhelmed with too much travel. I was tired. I wasn't feeling well, etc. And I flew home via Frankfurt, via London, via New York. And all the way, the faces kept coming, whether my eyes were open or shut. So when I got back, I contacted John Perkins, and he said, "Let's go."
Strong call.
Yeah. So we went, and they wanted 12 people from the modern world. People with open hearts, people who knew the rainforest is critical to the future of life, people who had a global voice, people who would respect the ways of the shaman, and people who knew that indigenous people have something important to share with those of us in the modern world. And so we went down to Quito, down the Valley of the Volcanoes, over the eastern side of the Andes, and flew in little planes into the Amazon rainforest where there's no roads. And when we landed, and they took 3 people at a time because the planes are so small, because there's little baby landing strips, dirt landing strips. Then they came out of the forest with their orange geometric face paint, their yellow and black feather crowns and spears, and that was the beginning of what's called the Pachamama Alliance.
Incredible introduction to this chapter.
That's chapter 2.
Wow, chapter 2. So where did it lead you, this chapter 2?
Well, the indigenous people said in the very beginning, if you're coming to help us, even though we've invited you here, don't waste your time. But if you know somehow the liberation of your world is bound with the liberation of ours, then let's work together. And that's the foundation of Pachamama Alliance. So we at first we just thought it was a one-off thing. My husband Bill was part of this, but he and I participated in a sacred ayahuasca ceremony with the shaman in the jungle there, and they'd never done that with the white people before. And in that sacred medicine ceremony in the jungle with people who pick the ayahuasca and brew it, the shaman.
The pure one.
Yeah, very, very pure. We saw this was something that we needed to really understand and attend to. And so out of that first encounter, we went home and began to talk about it, and it became clear that this was the next chapter of our lives, his and mine together. So there's so many things to say, but the indigenous people that we met with the Achuar told us, we need your help to understand the modern world because we know it's inevitable that we need to connect with the modern world, and we're initiating it before it comes to us in ways we can't control. And they had seen in their dreams and visions that oil exploration and mining was coming to their territory in the year 2000. And this was in 1994. Okay. So we taught them about the modern world. They didn't know anything about money. I mean, it was a really unbelievable privilege to be with indigenous people and educate them about the world that was coming. But at the same time, they educated us about the deep and profound spirit of the natural world and the earth wisdom that is now had been lost in the affluent world, in the modern world. And they told us the most important work we could do is change the dream of the modern world. That's how they put it. The dream of overconsumption, the dream of acquisition, the dream of more and more and more of everything, to a new dream. And so both Pachamama Alliance works all over the world to change the dream. We call it creating a whole new dream, an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just human presence on this planet. And in the Amazon, we now work with 30 indigenous groups, indigenous nations, in this place called the Sacred Headwaters, which is the most biodiverse place on planet Earth. It's primarily roadless and untouched, and it's the largest indigenous-led conservation program on Earth now, Pachamama Alliance. And we do these educational programs all over the world. So we founded this amazing thing, and that's chapter 2.
Wow. Beautiful. Wow.
Well, we now realize, I mean, this is pretty bold thing to say, that what we need to do is end human supremacy.
Oh, really? Okay.
Transform human supremacy into human reciprocity with the earth, each other, and the community of life. It's a big topic. Yeah. We also realize that indigenous wisdom is key, earth wisdom, to reversing the climate crisis, which we all created. We can, in fact, reverse it. We can end the climate crisis. It's not something we need to fear. We need to transform. We can do it.
How to?
Well, by really being humbled by the climate crisis. It's feedback from the mother, intervening and disrupting the way we're living. That's taken us off course, and we don't need to sacrifice anything. That's what I want to make sure people know. We need to recover what's really meaningful about life. Which is, being touched by awe and wonder, by life itself, by the natural world, by the privilege of being alive at such an epic time in history when we're in a polycrisis where everything is collapsing because it's time for its collapse. It needs to be reborn from a whole nother paradigm. So we consider this period here, I consider it, that COVID was mourning sickness, as I said at Harvest, for a species that's pregnant with a new way of being, a new civilization, a new way of living on Earth that's respectful to one another, to the earth, to all our kin, all the species that share this planet with us, and future generations. And so that's the work.
What are the biggest obstacles to this?
Governments and the short-sighted cycles we're in with corporations and business. Nobody's wrong and bad. We're just caught in systems and structures that don't serve us any longer and that are inappropriate. This mindset of scarcity, that there's not enough to go around and someone somewhere is always going to be left out, is a false understanding of the world. I wrote a book called The Soul of Money. That was a chapter in there where I talk about that. And we've over-individuated at the expense of each other, whereas Indigenous people hold as the highest good the good of the community. And within that, everyone's cared for. But if we individuate at the expense of the community, which is really more the way of the modern world, we lose sight of what is really that which will foster and foment a thriving, just, sustainable way of life for everyone, including ourselves. So, there's so many things to say about that. There's everybody here at I Met at Harvest is working on it in their own way. And it's just time.
You're mentioning the soul of money.
Yeah.
It's almost a paradox because money doesn't seem to have a soul. Can you explain this?
Yes, it's kind of a trick title. Because
no, that's good.
Money doesn't have a soul, but we do. And we invented money. Money does not grow on trees. Pennies do not fall from heaven. We made it up. And now we're totally at the effect of our own creation. We made it up 4,500 years ago as a society-wide phenomenon, and now it's hijacked us, and we've made it into a god. And we all know that's not true. But we've let the economic system overwhelm the ecological system, when in fact the economic system is a mere subset of the ecological system. But we've reversed it, so the economic system now is trying to find its way to include the ecological system, but it's the other way around. So we've lost our bearings, we've lost our soul a little bit with money. We've made money more important than God, money more important than the natural world, money more important than our relationships with each other, and those are lies that we tell each other every day. We're not lying on purpose, but it's a cultural lie that we're swimming in. I call it the mindset of scarcity, the 3 toxic myths of scarcity. The first is there's not enough, which is not true. The second is more is better, which isn't always true. And the third is that's just the way that it is, which clearly is not true. And I say the radical, surprising truth is sufficiency. I learned this from Buckminster Fuller. Enough. The exquisite experience of being met by the universe with exactly what you need. And that actually is what's taking place most of the time, but we don't recognize it. We race right past enough for more, and we don't even know that enough happened. And enough that I'm talking about is not an amount of anything. It's a way of being in life. And I use this principle, which I call the principle of sufficiency. If you let go of trying to get more of what you don't really need, which is what we're brainwashed to want more of, it frees up oceans of energy that's all tied up in this chase to turn and pay attention to what you already have. When you pay attention to what you already have, when you nourish what you already have, when you love what you already have, and when you share what you already have, it expands.
So that would be the tool you give to people to change their dream individually?
In many ways, yes. Another way of saying it is what you appreciate appreciates. What you appreciate appreciates. So when we get in touch with what we already have and we appreciate it, it expands in our experience and we don't need more. That's one way of talking about it. The other way of talking about it is to let these structures and systems that are collapsing, let them die. A death of dignity. When you hospice, someone or something, it dies with dignity and grace, with some gratitude for all that we've received from these structures and systems that no longer serve us, while we midwife the birth of the new structures and systems that now we understand will serve us, circular economies that don't rape and plunder the earth, where there's no waste, ways of being with each other where we respect and accept each other's differences and adore them rather than have them be the reason that we would have conflict, turning conflict into creativity rather than violence, 1,000 things. But I'm sure all the people you've spoken to are talking about exactly what I'm talking about in their own way. Because I think what's underway on planet Earth is a profound rebirth, a transformation, a great turning, as Joanna Macy would say, one of my teachers. And we're all feeling it and trying to find our voice in it and how we can contribute to it. I know that everybody knows it, somewhere deep in their soul. And I learned this other phrase that I think is important. Pain pushes until vision pulls. And this comes from Michael Beckwith and my friend Reverend Deborah Johnson, two African-American teachers in the United States. Pain pushes us until vision pulls. And when you're in pain, you can barely tolerate it, and it's fearful and frightening and upsetting, and it hurts. But when you have a vision strong enough to pull you through the pain, you can get through it. And what we need on this planet is a vision so strong, so beautiful, so awe-inspiring that it'll pull us through the pain we're in now. So I think that's part of what wants to happen and what Harvest is all about, you could say.
I'm asking a question to all the people of Harvest. This is because we're talking about radical connection. This is a theme of Harvest this year. And I wanted to ask you, Lynne, if you can recall a memory where you felt as a child radically connected. If you have like a meal or a moment to share with who you were, who was the company, what was the atmosphere, what was the food, maybe if it's a meal or something else.
Yeah, gosh. Well, when I think about my family, the one I grew up in, my own family, and before my father died, my grandmother lived with us, and she had been enormously wealthy. Her husband, my grandfather, built all the infrastructure in Korea after from 1895 to 1906 until the Japanese occupied Korea. So he built all the railroads and the bridges over the Han River and the water system in Seoul, etc. And then the Japanese came and they lost everything. And my grandfather died. I didn't ever meet him. So my grandmother lived with us, and she had grown up she had been a very elegant, wealthy woman. And she sat at the dining room table with us. This is when my father was still alive. And I remember she taught us, you could say manners, but that's the wrong word. She taught us about respecting the experience of eating together, of sharing food in a way that not only nourishes your body, but nourishes the relationship. And I remember sitting in the dining room table, we weren't allowed to, there were all the things we couldn't do. We couldn't answer the phone, we couldn't leave the table, we had to, behave.
Yeah.
My sisters and my brother and I, and my grandmother and my father was a musician, so he sort of laughed at this formality, but honored it and loved it. And I remember we had, 3 courses. It was very fancy. But it taught me the power of sitting together for a meal, which is so sometimes rare in today's world with your own children. And I remember the conversations. I remember the depths of love that I felt at that table. I remember feeling held by my family and nourished by the food. And I go back to that all the time with my own family, and it's an important part of the way I was raised.
Wow, beautiful memory, but clearly connection, deep connection.
Yes, yeah. Connection with the food, with the earth, where it came from, the people that were serving us, my grandmother, her generation, my father and mother, and my generation. Something about that whole thing comes back to me from time to time that I feel very grateful for.
Thank you so much. Lynne Twist, thank you for being here in Kaplankaya for this podcast. And I'm very jealous of these people doing the retreat with you. For retreats, going and visiting and doing beautiful meditation. Thank you so much, Lynne Twist, for being here in Kaplankaya and in this podcast.
Thank you very much for your questions and your really deep listening. It's a pleasure to talk to you, an honor, and very moving, so thank you.
Pleasure so shared. Thank you, Lynne. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching us.